the Aaron Rodgers situation, the type of repair he's had, the type of surgery he's had, and how he's going about his rehab.
Yeah, so for those who don't follow the NFL, just to give you a quick overview, so you know why we're talking about this. So we don't tend to talk about just random NFL or what any other sport injury situations, but this one is particularly interesting, and I've had is definitely the injury that I've had the most like DMs questions about from another sport in my time doing NRL physio stuff. It has been crazy the amount of interest in this because he suffered an Achilles rupture in week 1. It is now week 9, I think, in the NFL. So
Yep.
suffered a rupture. It's of particular importance, because Aaron Rodgers is a huge player. Like he is a QB for the New York Jets, has just transferred there this year, is kind of like their white knight, hoping that I'm sure Jets fans were hoping he was going to come there and be like their savior. But the other component is he's 39 years old, so he's quite advanced in age. For a QB, like you hear 39 as an NRL fan, you might go, "Oh my god, like how's he still?" But QBs can kind of play to that late 30s, early 40s in some cases. We've seen it with Tom Brady recently, still played to a high level, so it is possible. So he's 39 years old. He's had that Achilles rupture. He's gone and he's had an Achilles repair surgery with what they call a speed bridge. Now, it's not as cutting edge and new as a lot of the American media likes to make out that it was. I saw a lot of articles sort of saying this new fandangled surgical technique. Like, it's been around for years. It's something that is relatively, for those higher level kind of guys, it is really, really common, those high level athletes. So he's had that speed bridge surgery. And where I think it now, because none of that so far is anything too out of the ordinary, but then you've seen after 2 weeks, he was out of the boot, which is usually a 6-week process. So usually you're in that moon boot for 6 weeks. He was out of the boot after 2 weeks. He's been very public with his rehab, doing a lot of stuff already with some weight bearing things, that kind of stuff. And now has been out on the field pre-game throwing the ball. And people have been losing their collective minds about the fact that he's out there throwing the ball. So I think there's a lot to talk through here. We probably will try not to go too long on it, but effectively, my overall thoughts on it, because people have sort of said, where do you sit on it? Is this superhuman? Is it? So it's a mix. Like, he absolutely is doing something right, because even if you just say he is rushing it, to have the mobility and the confidence, the mental confidence to be able to move the way he is. Even if I took my most confident Achilles patients that I've had and told them after 2 weeks, you've got to get out of the boot, so many of them would have been so hesitant to do that because it's such a major injury. They're that they feel quite significant pain with it. They're very hesitant with that kind of stuff. And then to be kind of moving around and throwing a ball with some foot movement after 6 weeks, I think it was also something that I was like, many of my patients would not have, even considered doing that, because the point we make about ACLs a lot of the time is, as the physio, you kind of have to hold people back because they feel pretty good after 6 weeks. They're like, yeah, I'm feeling good. And you have to be the physio, be like, I know you feel good, but you need to hold back. Achilles aren't like that a lot of the time. Like, people are still in quite a bit of pain. They don't have strength in the area. It's quite tight. It can be sore, all that kind of stuff. So
Swelling as well. So
that's right.
make it swollen for a long time.
100%. So very rarely are you there in those early stages, like after 4-6 weeks, trying to hold people back, because the early recovery from an Achilles repair isn't all that accelerated, and it doesn't feel all that good. So there's that component to it, is that there is definitely parts of this that I'm like, whatever he is doing is fantastic. But there's also the other few components. I think, he's definitely he's not doing it purposely, but what he has done so far is making people think that he is a lot better than he is. And so the perfect example is that throw that he did at 6 weeks, where he kind of jogged or shuffled back a little bit and then shuffled forward. It's a tear to his, so he's out of the boot. He will have an insert, a plastic insert in that shoe that comes up his leg. So he's wearing tracksuit pants every time. That insert, a plastic insert, will hold his left foot in a position of comfort for the Achilles and make sure that it does not move. So it's not, even though he's out of the boot, he's still got something in that shoe that means that the pressure going through that Achilles is minimal to none, right? It's very, very minimal. So you have that component, which, not a lot of people have seen that. But then also, even when he was throwing that ball, he's mostly just pushing off his right foot. His right foot is doing all the work, especially as a right-handed QB. That's the foot that you're going to push off. And I think we've seen like Kirk Cousins, he suffered his Achilles injury recently on his right. That is so much harder to come back from and to accelerate as a right-handed QB, because you are dropping back on that right foot, pushing through that foot. That is the one that will have a lot of pressure on it. So the fact that it's his left foot in that video where he's throwing is basically not doing much at all. So even though it looks fantastic, and as I said, it's a testament to him that he has the confidence to be able to move as smoothly as he does, his left foot is still not doing much, and nor should it be at 6 weeks, nor should it be. And then the other component of it, and they've spoken about, when can he come back and all that kind of stuff. We've spoken about how these situations happen. He's doing it with an increased risk of injury. There's no two ways about that. The healing things, and I should have mentioned at the start, for those who don't know about Rodgers, he's got that reputation of like a free thinker. He's anti-vax, anti-medicine to a degree with certain things. I think that he's made jokes or sort of talked about listening to like dolphin mating calls as part of his, process or recovery. He does like dark therapy, psychogenics, and all this kind of stuff. So he's a bit left field with all that kind of stuff, but there are still there's healing times, right? There's healing times to these things. So he is absolutely doing it with an increased risk, not only of re-rupture, and that is a risk, but also, and probably the biggest concern for me and what I've looked, because I've had 2 patients who've accelerated and been out of the boot at 2 weeks with this injury. So I have seen it happen. Both of them, and look, you can use this to shit on me as a physio if you want. Both of them had horrible outcomes. They were both athletes, and they found a surgeon who was happy to accelerate them and get them out of a boot in 2 weeks and kind of really push it through. And both of them didn't re-rupture, but they both had, effectively, they healed with loose Achilles. Like their Achilles, because they pushed it too soon, too quickly, that Achilles, it wasn't completely healed. So when it healed stretched. And such an important part of that Achilles is that power when you're pushing off. So they just lost a little bit of that. And I mean, I'll talk in a minute, because I want to throw to you. I'll talk in a minute about what I think about his return to play. But I know on that point, I think you've got a really good point about, sort of how it is managed conservatively and how important it is to not have that Achilles heal in a loose way.
Yeah, so I guess the anecdotes that I've spoken to quite a few clinicians about over the years, because I guess in Queensland Health and public health, we see a lot more non-operative Achilles ruptures than operative ones. It's very uncommon for us to see actual Achilles repairs, to be fair. Like, we would see Fowler Kennedy protocol requested for most of the people that we see. And the biggest thing that people say is you don't want to take them out of like that sort of plantar grade position in the moon boot too quickly to get them in a long and loose position rather than a short and tight position. So that's the sort of vernacular or terminology that you can use in a nerd setting from a physio point of view, that if you want a better outcome for someone, generally speaking, for that force reduction and force translation, you want to heal them sort of more shorter and tighter. So it does mean they don't necessarily have as much active dorsiflexion range for a little bit longer, But from a tendon integrity point of view, that's actually a more beneficial place to heal rather than having really good dorsiflexion range, but then being long and loose, to use those type of terms, for the Achilles. So that's sort of the way we sort of go about it. So to your point, it's really nice to lay that out to the individual in front of you who's having, rehab for a non-operative Achilles protocol, to say to them, look, it will feel tight, it will feel stiff. That's actually better for you than it feeling, maybe less painful, but a little bit more loose with a better sort of, knee to wall range or active dorsiflexion range or something like that. So that's the sort of terminology that I'm a little bit more familiar with. So I don't know if anyone else listening subscribes to the same sort of thinking, but that sort of touches on your point as well, and sort of just gives credence to the way you've described it there, with the people that sort of try to get out a little bit quicker, or they get their range going quicker. Not always going to give you the best outcome from a force production point of view, from a sprinting point of view, from a resistance point of view as well.
Yeah, so I think then the big question is, when can he come back? He's obviously angling towards a return this season. I think for him to come back and have any sort of impact, he'd have to come back at around 3.5 months, 3.5, 4 months post surgery. People have said, is that even possible? Like, surely not, all that kind of stuff. I guess the big ones I want to look at is we had, it's pretty, not pretty standard, that's a lie, but we've seen guys consistently come back to NRL football. So these are guys like Darius Boyd, Carl Lawton. These kind of guys have come back and played good level NRL football at 5 months post surgery. So that has occurred. And in the NRL, all respect to Aaron Rodgers and what he does on the NFL gridiron, he is not putting the pressure through his Achilles that a Darius Boyd or a Carl Lawton will be when they go back out there and play rugby league, because they are involved in tackles. They are, sprinting. Theoretically, Rodgers can come back and try and limit himself to be a real pocket passer, which, he might need to take off every now and then, but he's not going into contact all that often, pushing through contacts, having to drive through that. So we've had that at 5 months. We've also had guys like the Russian gymnast. I want to say his first name's Artur, I think, Artur. And he came back in 3 months to gymnastics with he wasn't doing dismounts, so he wasn't jumping and landing, but then he was back to doing that by the Olympics at 4 months, I think. So effectively, where I go with this, it is absolutely possible for him to come back at 3.5 to 4 months. Is it without risk? Hell no. Is it something where you would expect him to be at good performance levels off that leg? Hell no. Can a right-handed QB with a left Achilles that isn't at 100% still do pretty well? Absolutely, because as we've just spoken about, it's his lead leg. It's not his back leg, so he doesn't have to push off it as much. It's only if he, the pocket collapse and he needed to take off that he might need to really rely on it. But I think at 39 years old, the Jets, look, I'd love to think that I might have to eat my words here, but the Jets aren't going to win the Super Bowl, I don't think. I just don't see that happening. He signed you might be able to correct me here, a 3-year deal. So he's got this year and 2 more years, I think. So he's still got time to be influential for them, unless they really, really improve, and they're going to play tomorrow. So by the time this comes out, I might, look a little bit more stupid because they have a big win, when they play. But yeah, I just think it absolutely is possible. And anybody who says it's not possible, I think all these things are possible. It's just the level of risk and the level of performance that you want to come back at. Like, the level of risk is going to be high for a re-rupture, and the level of performance isn't going to be anywhere as good as he would want it to be, because you just cannot. It doesn't matter to me how many, psychedelic treatments he has found that are, rewriting the laws of whatever he wants to rewrite. There are tissue healing properties that, unless you're, without getting a lawsuit, using certain performance enhancing things to make that happen, there are healing, times to these things that will they're just there, and human bodies don't vary that much on these kind of things. So I think it's absolutely possible. Will he come back? I would be surprised purely because of that risk versus reward. We talk about risk versus reward on here all the time. I think if you looked at it and you went, yeah, the Jets are, like if it was Nathan Cleary and he was the quarterback for the Penrith Panthers who hadn't won a comp in 40 years and they really, really needed him. He was the last piece they needed to win the comp. You could see it. And it's the same with Rodgers. If that was the case, I'd kind of wouldn't be surprised. But at 39, with a team that's probably not going to win the Super Bowl with a less than 100% Aaron Rodgers, I just would be surprised if they risk it, especially considering he's got 2 years left on his contract. I mean, where do you sit on it? You're probably the bigger NFL fan than me, so you might have a few more insights in that kind of stuff.
It's a really good discussion point. I almost lean towards him playing, just depending on where the Jets' record is. I think the record dictate what he does. They're 4-3 at the moment with the game in hand. So say if it's week 16, they're 8-8. They're in a wild card spot. I tend to think he'll play. I think he'll be like, if I'm in a playoff sniff, because the AFC is pretty wide open. Like you look at the two better teams there, it's really Baltimore that's really jumping out there because Kansas City probably aren't quite as well. They're still a 7-win team, but like Kansas City are thereabouts. The Bengals are sniffing around. The Jags are sniffing around. But the Jets are second best defensively in the NFL, but they're the second worst offensively in the NFL. So you sort of think, if Rodgers just gives this team 21 points, if he throws for 3, or even if he can throw 2 in, with a really good running game, with really good solid defense, they could be in the hunt. But again, you got to have a lot of things go your way, and I think they need to be alive for him to do that. My scenario is they're alive, he plays. If he ruptures, he just goes, well, I've got that much time until the next season anyway. I'll just rehab it till next season. And if he gets through that game but they don't win, he goes, well, I gave it a crack. He's not going to have that many chances at his age and at his point in his career anyway. With the amount of salary cap he's going to be consuming, you got to make a decision of like, well, how good is this team at the moment this year? And the Jets are a pretty bloody good team. Albeit they just have nothing at quarterback behind him, which is always the way. That's just the way teams are constructed. That's the salary cap at play. I would lean to him more playing because I think the Jets will be thereabouts. The AFC is pretty wide open. Like there's not a lot of teams that are really separating themselves, and they're in a division with Miami and the Bills, who will probably take wins off each other. So I don't think you'll see a team that's like a 12 or 13 win team. I think you'll see a lot of those teams be like at that 9-10 marks. If they're sort of 8 or 9 wins, I think you'll see Aaron Rodgers on the field this year. That'll be my big prediction, my Nostradamus prediction from that point of view, mate.
Yeah, so I think for me, as I said, you're definitely much more the bigger NFL expert than me. So maybe I've just got the past Jets in my head as to being trash. So I just kind of go off that. But from my perspective, I think medically there is absolutely a good scenario, like a good chance that he can come back this season. And it would be unprecedented for the NFL, but it wouldn't be unprecedented based on what has happened in other sports and what is happening currently in the management of Achilles injury. So it's not out of the realms of possibility in that respect. I think it's more just accepting that he is able to come back because he is taking more risk for re-injury and likely to diminish performance. And interestingly, I think it's a really good time to record this podcast because the guy who owns the quickest return to play time for an Achilles injury in the NFL is Cam Akers, who came back a couple of seasons ago in 5 months, I think, or four and a half months. So he holds the record, came back as a running back, he looked okay when he first came back, but his yards per carry still wasn't great. But never really got back to the worldy running back that he was before that. And then today he ruptured his other Achilles.
Did he really?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So today he ruptured his other Achilles. So he's I think I saw some stats somewhere where it's like there's never been an NFL running back come back after rupturing
True.
both
Yeah.
Achilles. So
Yeah.
it was potentially career over for him.
Mm.
So it just shows you, and once again, you talk about that risk, like for Akers, he's a young guy. Rodgers has only got a couple of seasons left in him, likely anyway. So, but yeah, there's a really interesting case, and it just shows you, by all means, Akers had played a couple of seasons before rupturing the other one, but he hadn't performed all that well. Like his performance compared to pre-surgery was not, and the demands of running back are different to QB. And there's a whole, like, it's so multifactorial. But yeah, I just think, yeah, it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility for him to come back. And I would be shocked if he comes back and plays. I just think you need to accept that a big component of why these guys do it isn't because they've discovered some new treatment that is just halving recovery times. There is absolutely a component where he has access to so much that your regular athletes don't have access to, and that can add little percentages here and there. But it's such a big percentage of why they can come back earlier is just taking more risk.
Yep. Really nicely put there. That's a good way to end that topic on Aaron Rodgers. On the NFL